Hello, everyone. This is Whitney Will from Star Hearth Astrology, and today I'm continuing my Rising Signs as Archetypal Life Path videos. Today we are going to talk about Libra rising. And this is the special one. I think to be a Libra rising in the world, I think they're all great. I think they're all a special calling. But there's something about Libra that, as a rising sign, understands at a fundamental level that we're not alone in this world, and that our job is to make things right, to make things beautiful, that in the kind of chaos and the imbalances of the world, there's always something to be redeemed. And you'll see as we go through the chart that this kind of redemption motif and this helping and this fixing and this making whole, whether through creative means or through direct helping, is at the heart of Libra rising. So let's begin. Right. So again, I want to remind people, because I get a lot of comments saying, I'm this rising and the houses don't work out this way in my chart. If you're using a quadrant house system, which most of the default house systems are going to be quadrant house systems, then the houses are not going to fit perfectly with the signs. So these videos use whole sign houses. And so you should be able to, on more advanced astrological software, to change the house systems, because whole sign houses will take whichever sign the ascendant is in, and that will become the whole first house. And then each sign will get an entire house going around in zodiacal order. I go over this more in my introduction video to the series, which you can check out in this playlist on YouTube. Okay. As we enter into Libra rising, right? The first house of Libra rising is filled with paradox. And I think you'll see that theme again and again, because what it means to be a Libra rising is full of paradox. Libra is the sign of paradox, right? It's when we come to a paradox that the question has to change, because now suddenly this kind of simple answer is no longer possible. And right, Libra is the response. And the response, you can see from watching politicians, rarely answers the direct question, right? It's very rare in our interactions with other humans that we're asked a simple question and that we respond to it directly, right? So Libra is the mirroring that creates a new reality, right? When we look at ourselves in the mirror, when we look at anything in the mirror, we're not seeing it as it is, and we're not seeing it how we think it is, right? Where we see new pieces of it. We see the lack of symmetry. We see the way the light works, right? When we can be looking at something and we take a picture of it and it looks different than what we're looking at, right? So Libra is the phenomena of observation and how it changes things, right? If we are trying to take a picture of something and it doesn't capture the feeling or the sense that we have of looking at it in real life, then maybe we want to change the angle. We start doing things, we start responding in these different ways, which I think is part of how you can understand Libra as being a cardinal sign, right? That's kind of one of the paradoxes. How can the response be the beginning of something? Well, the response is the beginning of something because responses never keep things as they are. They always move things along. And so that is kind of this way that Libra is a beginning, but right? It's not the beginning like Aries. It's not something out of nothing. It's how do you change when you feel fully seen? And as a therapist, this is such an important phenomena, right? This is almost the work of therapy, is that when you see something as it is, it changes, right? The fact, like, as soon as we arrive at our identities, we transcend them. Right? You can say something in therapy and your therapist can repeat word for word what you have just said, and you hear it as something new. You can say something in therapy, and the fact that a therapist witnesses it and reflects it and holds it as you know, in the way that you're saying it, which hopefully, hopefully that experience happens. Then suddenly it becomes real and we make different decisions about it. We can admit that something is true about ourselves, and then we can accept it, or we can decide what to do with it. Before it's real, in the internal, sinking, obsessive, internal world of Virgo, where we're trying to hold everything and fix everything before we step into relationship, we're trying to figure out what's real, right? When we're in a traumatized state and we've had to step outside of ourselves to survive it, reality doesn't hold the same weight. We're not as confident. And so when we step into the Libra relationship, that is restored. And so Libra rising moves through the world in this giving and receiving, right? This seeing and reflecting. This seeing and being seen, and in so doing transforms the world. And the key to Libra rising is that if you are present with it, right, it's a gift, right? And so one phrase that I've heard to describe Libra rising is universally palatable, right? They're invested in the harmony of the things around them. And so, right, it feels good to be around them because they, you know, more often than not are paying attention, or they can fake paying attention. So, right, depending on where the sun is, that's going to change how this feels, right? The sun is in its fall in Libra, because Libra is not so focused on the ordering principle of the self, right? Because the identity, insofar as the first house is the identity, is really about how do I interact, right? And there's a redemption motif. And I want to kind of emphasize that I think for most Libra risings, there is a kind of broken heart at the core. Right? There is a kind of essential failure. And I'll come back around to this in, you know, when we talk about the 4th house, when we talk about the 10th house and the 12th house. But right there is something that has them looking outside themselves for redemption. And right, it's only when you've got to the limits of what you can do alone that you can really understand the significance of sharing anything in this world, right? The miracle of experiencing things together versus alone. And it's a miracle because it makes things real and kind of brings you into a full experience and receptivity of the moment. So yeah, let's dig in. All Libra risings have their second house in Scorpio. So I think there's several ways, right? The second house is our attachment to materials. It's our attachment to stuff. It's where we kind of stash the materialism of our being. It can be our access to resources and how we make, it can be how we make money. And it's so quizzical, right? Because Scorpio is the counterculture. Scorpio is the weird, broken stuff that gets shoved off to the side. Scorpio is, right? It is the ugly, the stuff that gets rejected. And right, so again, we've got this brokenhearted redemption motif, gonna make it beautiful, gonna set it right, not just in the vacuum of myself like Virgo, but out in the world in interaction, right? How can I make this beautiful again? And so I think, right, at its core, there is this kind of, how do I make this beautiful again? Whether it's being a therapist, right? How do I kind of restore this person? Whether it's being a land conservationist, right? How, like, a la Wendell Berry's idea, there's only sacred places and desecrated places. Right? How do we kind of fix this brokenness? It's a kind of allegiance to the broken things of the world. But I think it can also be, in its shadow manifestation, an allegiance to the brokenness of the world. Right? If you are here to set things right and fix them and make them beautiful again, things have to be essentially broken. And so there can be this attachment to tragedy and woundedness that I think is part of the Scorpionic second house. There's one other thing I wanted to say. Yeah, I think, right, Scorpio also being the sign of transformation and moving through forms. There, right? How are you attached to something that's going through the iterations of transformation? Well, I think, right, to make things beautiful again, to reflect things, right? Your skill is in transforming them, whether it's, again, it's humans or it's spaces or different places. There's something about this primal talent of moving things through forms. That's part of it. We've got Sagittarius in the third house. And this I find, right, there's no better kind of phrase than God is in the details. And if you're going to be as aesthetically sensitive as Libra rising needs to be, kind of need God in the details, because you're paying attention to all the moving pieces and all of what their symbols are, right? So Sagittarius is the sign of belief and creed, right? And when we look at third house things, all the little details, I recently heard astrologer Cameron White call the third house the junk drawer of the chart. I was like, yes, that is the best description. But right, when we're looking at the junk drawer of the chart through a Sagittarian lens, we're looking at how it's connected to all these big ideas, right? So for instance, this is a pen, but through a Sagittarian lens, right? Under men entirely great, the pen is mightier than the sword. So this is a weapon. This is a weapon of thought. This is a weapon of communication. This is like much more than what it is. And also, right, this is also a piece of design work that somebody worked on. It has color, it has form, it has use. And the Sagittarius piece is seeing all of the little things as these bigger things, right? Your daily life is your values and principles enacted? And if that is not in order, then the whole Libra project of everything in its perfect proportion is thrown off, right? So Libras, right, they're going to be very sensitive to, right, like microaggressions, right? The idea of these tiny things that we do that uncover these larger truths is a very Sagittarius in the third. This is a real sign of practice what you preach, right? And they might also be preaching in their smaller conversations, right? It's enjoying communicating about these bigger things, because everything is a symbol for something larger when we have Sagittarius in the third house. Now, this could also be problems with time management, which, right, as essentially creative people, that can always be a problem, because of the big ideas fitting into small spaces of time, right? So there's a visionary quality to it. So we'll see again when we get to the fifth house. That can be like, you know, the ideas are so big in the conversations that, right, a 15-minute conversation is trying to do things that 400 pages couldn't do. So there's a kind of, yeah, a kind of mismatch. But again, this is the paradox of Libra, right? What do we do if we take this thing that's at home over here? How do we make it, how do we fit it in a completely different place? I think there's also a contrarian quality to Libra, which is always this response. And I think we get that. I think that was the thing that I was forgetting to say about Scorpio in the second, right? Part of their resources being able to see what is missing, to see what's being pushed aside, and to figure out how to invite it back in. And I think that goes for Sag in the third house as well, right? Noticing how our big thoughts are fitting or not fitting into our daily lives. Okay, now the fourth house. In the fourth house, we reach the first shadow house. We reach the kind of temple of the family and the history and memory, which in some ways rules Libra, because those are all very lunar words, and the moon as kind of memory keeper, and the moon rules the 10th house of the chart. So we have this kind of this space of interiority. But in Libra, for Libra risings, it's the stone castle of Capricorn. It's the ancient tradition, right? It's the way that things have always been. This house is ruled by Saturn, and Saturn is exalted in Libra, right? Saturn is the, you know, the governor of the golden age, this ancient planet that, given enough time, right? Saturn, as the outermost traditional planet, rules the limitations of time, right? Everything in its proper proportion, which is the kind of ethos of Libra. If we get everything in its right place and its proper proportion, then we regain harmony. And to do that, right, that balance requires Saturn. It requires limitation. We can't have all Jupiter. Things can't be everything as abundant as, like, everything can't be at peak abundance. We can't all live at the full moon. We have to retract. We have to wane. And so we've got this stone foundation, and it can be a supportive foundation, and it can be a weight to carry, right? The Capricorn in the fourth house, in the sign of the family, Libra risings tend to inherit a role not just of caretaking in a Cancerian sense, but of caretaking in a Capricornian sense, which looks like, you know, parentification, not just for emotional matters, but for practical matters, right? And it's also this kind of, right, this, the hard work of the chart has something in the weight of Capricorn. There's some sense of obligation, there's some sense of healing the family is the path to mastery. There's some sense of I had to survive as a very sensitive person in a not very sensitive family. Right? I've seen it shown up in lots of different ways, but there's something where they have to be an adult in their family roles. And there's something about taking on the ancient story of the family as this kind of primal identification of the Libra rising. Now, of course, right, how that shows up, where that shows up will depend on Saturn and where Saturn lives in the chart, what things are connected. The response to that, right? The response to this heavy kind of anchor of Saturn and a Capricornian fourth house is the creative genius that is near like channeling capabilities of the Aquarius fifth house, which can create from a place of pulling things out of culture and out of the zeitgeist with a visionary and genius quality. My dad, who's a Libra rising, had a poster on our wall in my childhood that said, "It's remarkable what you can accomplish when you don't care who gets the credit," which is a quotation from, I don't know, like Truman or something. But right, this idea, we've got Aquarius, the sign of the kind of impersonal, in the fifth house, which is the artist studio, which is this kind of playfulness. But when you have this playfulness in the flavor of Aquarius, Aquarius believes in the impossible. So there is a way that playfulness can kind of reach in and have this visionary creative quality that surprises the Libra rising in themselves, right? They don't know where it comes from. And it can be this almost like I can step into the air sign world. I can step into the world of ideas and thought. I can travel really fast. I can find the thing that I need to find, and I'm not worried about whether it fits my image or not. And then I express that back. I'm playing with big ideas. Again, hearkening back to Sagittarius in the third house, right? My playthings, my pleasure is in this oddball, out of the box experimentation. And the art that I can create with that, the babies that I can conceive through my ability to kind of zoom around the future and think the impossible is a kind of genius. And right, that's part of my ability to reflect other people and to help them change and to help them transform, is because I never look at something for what it is right now, right? I transcend the Capricornian anchor of the family by creating something completely new that will counter it. So there's a pattern breaking in the family quality to Libra risings. Yeah. When we get to the 6th house, we have Pisces in the 6th house. And this is a strange, I'm going to say that a billion times. All of the sign placements in Libra for Libra risings are strange in the houses that they fall in. They're paradoxical, right? We have the kind of the numinous connection of Pisces in the 6th house of illness, injury, of healing, of daily bodily care. And Pisces, right? I think this can show up in so many ways. Pisces in the 6th can be a martyr in terms of trying to care for and heal other people at a neglect of the self. It can show a certain disregard for the self, because again, in Aquarius and in Pisces, we're not taking our sense of self so personally. And Aquarius rising, or sorry, Libra rising too, if they're connected to one other individual, right, their sense of self no longer resides inside their body. It is in the connection. And if that person is really suffering, to save themselves is to save the other person, right? To preserve the relationship. So there can be a kind of neglect that happens with Pisces. Now it's also, right, the healing that happens also might not happen in a straightforward allopathic medicine way. They can have mysterious ailments that kind of arise out of nowhere and dissolve back into nowhere, and they don't quite understand them. And sometimes it takes a while even to notice them. And I think this goes for all of the air sign risings, right? And maybe even fire sign risings. They're living in their minds and their spirits, not super in their bodies. I think you need earth heavy to worry about practical things, but I think that you need a lot of water to actually even be able to feel what's happening. And so, right, though this is a water sign, this water sign is plugged into the numinous. And so, right, their connection to a higher power, their feelings of being supported or unsupported in a spiritual sense will manifest through the body. Yeah. And again, to kind of see more into that, we would look for Jupiter, the traditional ruler of Pisces, in the chart. Then we get to the 7th house. The 7th house for Libra risings is Aries, ruled by Mars. This is a paradox, right? We have the 7th house, the place of reflection, the place where we enter into relationship, the place where we project the things that we cannot own about ourselves, the balancing energy to balance the strength of our identity. And we have Aries, we have raw, self-centered not in a pejorative way, but right, taking reference from my feelings, from my inspirations, from my enthusiasm. You can come if you can keep up. No, Libra is like, we're gonna change our pace to match yours. Kind of the opposite. But when Libra risings identify with the sense of making things beautiful, of harmonizing the world, of harmonizing relationships, of harmonizing spaces, they, right, what can you not do if that is who you think you are? Well, you can't create conflict and disharmony, right? So you're going to push that out into the other. And what that means is that relationships with conflict are going to come to you, right? And you might, until you can own wherever your Mars is, whatever that Mars story, however aggression and anger and conflict shows up, right? It's going to be witnessing other people as bringing that to you, right? No, what I just make things beautiful. It's you dropping your clothes everywhere and like knocking my furniture over that created the chaos. And so, right, either I'm going to be like, you know, so what am I going to do about that? Am I going to risk the conflict? Am I going to follow along behind you, tidying up in a kind of codependent way? Am I going to have to figure out the right way to express my needs? At different points, all of these are probably going to be true, right? There is a way to, I think that, right? Part of being a Libra rising and being empowered as a Libra rising is going to have to do with setting the boundaries. What do you not take on? What mess do you not try to clean up, right? What is too much resources, right? These Scorpio resources that are very potent and very yours, right? It's ruled by the same thing. What is worth spending resources on? Ruled by the same thing in that Scorpio and Aries are both ruled by Mars. So when you find Mars in the chart, it's connecting the 7th and the 2nd. What is just for me? What are other people trying to take from me? No. In a more positive way, I think this, right, this again kind of underlies Libra rising's ability to be great team players, right? This is not so much about being a follower. This is about, right, like if you, right, finding other people that have like, this is the mission, and then Libra risings can figure out kind of like, okay, how do we make this work, right? If Aries says, this is the room we need to redecorate, Libra rising is like, great. If Aries is like, this is the purpose that we need to facilitate, Libra can change all of the pieces around that mission. It is a response to something, right? It's the creative response to the problem of Aries in this sense, right? Then we get to the 8th house. Intimacy, secrets, the bedchamber of the 7th house, the night, as in like the evening night, not like Prince Charming night, of the 7th house, right? Where do we put this in? And I think the 8th house is already a place of paradox, because it's a place where everything that we think we are in relationships, we hit these bumps in the 8th house. And Taurus, right? The 8th house is a place where you transform if you share. Taurus doesn't like to share. Taurus, or it can share if you play with its things the way it wants you to play with its things. It does not want you to be taking the things that it attaches, that it is bonded with as its, and moving them around. Taurus has a really fixed internal sense of value. And the 8th house is the place of power dynamics. So there can be a rigidity in one-on-one relationships. There can actually be maybe not so much a stinginess, depending, unless Saturn is there, but there can be this sense of like, okay, now that we're together and this is ours, you need to, I assume that you have all the same values as me, right? What's mine is ours, but really what's ours needs to stay under control. And that, I think, is the real shadow of intimacy in Libra risings, is maybe this kind of controlling And it's important to note, right, that always comes from a place of trying to create safety for themselves. But there can be a kind of stubbornness. I think the other really beautiful thing about Taurus in the 8th house is that, right, the 8th house is a place of intimacy, and Taurus is so sensual that Libra risings, right, again, these air signs can be totally up in their heads, really descend into this pleasurable space when they feel safe in intimacy, kind of get more access to this Libra space, or sorry, to the Taurus pleasure space. Now, again, how both of these feel, like the life of the Libra rising and their connection with intimacy, Libra and Taurus, are both ruled by Venus. So we want to find Venus in the chart because she'll be important for both of those things. Okay, then we have Gemini in the 9th house of higher ideas, long-term planning, long distance travel. I find this to be one of the most fun parts of connecting with Libra risings because, right, big ideas are a game. Like, right, we are having creativity and fun in these kind of far-ranging, broad conversations. We're going to go around and we're going to sample out a bunch of stuff, right? These Libra risings, I think, are some of the most engaging teachers because they're all about meeting you where you are. And Gemini can do that for the most part, right? So it's this kind of love of travel, of philosophy, of learning. And it's just, it's fun and it's playful and it doesn't need to be so serious, because where it gets serious is wherever Saturn is. No, but like, right, what you do with that information becomes really important, the 3rd house. But just the kind of creative collecting, connection, philosophy piece of it is very creative and playful with Gemini in the 9th. Okay. Then we have Cancer in the 10th. And Cancer is the tender. Like, yes, Cancer is the tender, the nurturer, the preserver, the protector. And different things get preserved and protected, right? Sometimes for people, this looks like literally becoming parents and being nurturers. But there is something that in their life essence from being a Libra rising, in this 10th house sense of how we're seeing of what our life's work is, it is tending to and protecting something. So I've seen this show up. I've seen multiple Libra risings who are land conservationists, which you can see environmental conservationists. They're protecting something. And then again, that's the Capricorn 4th house, literally taking mastery over the land. It's literal land. Therapists, right? Mothers, fathers, healers of different kinds, but it's going to be a healing that has emotional intimacy in it, right? There's something about bringing things back. Again, we're going to check on the moon to see where the work of the 10th house takes place, where it shows up. Aspects to the moon can inform what quality that has. Leo in the 11th. I think, right, this kind of ties in with the 7th a little bit, right? The house of friendship, the house of groups, the house of alliances being the place of Leo. Right? I think this shows, one of the 2 most common things that Libra and Leo have is their charisma, right? Their ability to charm. And so, right, there's this kind of charming thing. And I think that Libra is a really good sign to kind of deal with Leo, because Libra, in its constant adjustment and reflection, is really a lot of what Leo craves, and the kind of focus that Leo can bring to something, and the significance and its connection with what's here, what's right now, can really kind of focus the many talents of Libra into a clear channel. I think where it trips Libra up, I think the shadow of Leo in the 11th, is when they get too concerned with the feedback of their audience. Because again, with Aquarius in the 5th, their genius relies on them stepping outside of themselves, or letting go of their sense of themselves, to kind of channel these creative pieces. And with Leo in the 11th, they can get kind of caught up in how it's seen and the optics on it, and that can leave them into a space of paralysis and of not really knowing who to be, because they're trying to live into this thing that they think that other people want, or that they think that they have to be in order to belong. And that's that can be false. Okay. When we get to the 12th house, I think the real risk of the 12th house with Libra risings, the shadow of the 12th house, is the threats of aloneness, right? The terror of personal emptiness. Because Virgo is the sign of seeking to become whole entirely within oneself, right? It is the sign that Libra is a response to. Virgo can see itself in a vacuum and says, I am only worthy of engaging with the world when I have cleaned the impurities from my soul, whether they be the saturated fats from my diet, the chemicals from our food system, the trauma from the lives of children, the erratic behavior that I do when I get triggered, right? Whatever the purification mission that Virgo is on, it's saying, I'm not worthy until I finish this. And while Libra says, no, we heal the world together, we find the beauty in the world together, you can't ever be completely healed, but we can, find a place for you among the brokenness of this world. There's shadow, right? In the 12th house is getting trapped in the critical, I'm not good enough space of Virgo, which is a way of shrinking from relationship, right? If we're going from Virgo to Libra, we're talking about the redemption of the relationship. If we backslide from Libra into Virgo, we're shrinking away from relationship, right? We are saying, we're excusing ourselves from participation with aloneness. Now we also, right, the 12th house is a place of aloneness. So we get this underlined. And I think that when Libra risings are focused too much on others, when they are alone, they experience a sense of emptiness, and that feels really overwhelming and threatening. Almost that if they are not doing all of the work to engage in relationships with others, that they don't exist. And that is a really scary, overwhelming place to be. And again, right, whether there's a particular fault there, right, how that goes, I'm not saying that this is an issue for every Libra rising. That is all going to depend on Mercury and aspects to Mercury and what Mercury is doing in the whole thing, as the ruler of that house. also anything that might be there. But I see the 12th house as a kind of, it's a sinkhole for everyone. But that's really in loneliness and aloneness and losing your sense of yourself and the fear of being alone. That happens with Libra risings. Okay. Hopefully you enjoyed this video. I am slowly getting to the rest of them. Thanks for your patience. I will, now that I have moved, I will hopefully get them out faster and faster. So I'll see you all for Scorpio risings. Thank you to all the Libra risings. Thank you for choosing this chart. Thank you for being here. We need you. We appreciate you. If you want to support my work, you can head over to my Substack linked in the description and subscribe for my audio weekly forecasts, which are now being done as a podcast, for any articles and blogs I write and for these new videos. You can also book readings with me to kind of sink into all of these topics on my website, also linked in the description. Thank you. Have a good day.